final event. So as I said, the American Association of People with Disabilities has been really helpful and a great resource. They're starting their higher education project, and one of those projects that they're interested in is working with law students to discover what barriers they have. So with that, I will give it over to Dana.
Hi everyone, I am Dana Fink and I am Program Manager at the American Association of People with Disabilities, and I'll be joined by my colleague Michael Murray, who's Director of Programs, shortly. He's running a little late based on the time change, I think. But yeah, as Beth mentioned, we've been kicking off our higher education project, and I don't know, is anyone here familiar with that project? Awesome, and I'll just give you an overview. Essentially, it is we want to organize students with disabilities on their campuses to create a network to connect with each other and to share resources. And really, we know you guys are doing your own advocacy on your campuses and in your local communities. So what our role here is not to kind of recreate the wheel, but really is to elevate your voices to the national level so that we have an organized group of people with disabilities going for change. And when the Higher Education Act is going to be reauthorized shortly, we want to have that network available and have everyone be ready to kind of create that change with us. So a number of things that you'll find if you go to our website is, first of all, I mentioned ways to connect, so that we have a map of all different campus groups that are connected with our program already. And if your campus group is not on there and you would like to be on there, just feel free to get in contact with us. And it's also a method that you guys can kind of share ideas and things like that. Beyond that, we have just a number of resources about internship programs, scholarship programs, ways to overcome barriers in certain aspects, what your rights are, what you're entitled to, both in school and as you transition out into the workforce. So a number of resources available. If there's a resource that's not there that you think would really be valuable, please feel free to get in touch with us. We would love to know that as well. And then advocacy, which, as I said, is we want to let you guys work with us in D.C. at the national level, where we do quite a lot of policy work and legislative work at AAPD, and that's where we're really most successful. So we want to get your voices involved in that and to see where you guys can kind of help to create that change with us. We want your voice to shape the legislation that we're going to be implementing. So with that being said, what we have kind of is a bit of a focus group and activity. So it's just it's more of a surveying method to kind of get some of your ideas about what the barriers are in law school, with law school exams, going into the workforce, things that you've experienced, things that you've kind of overcome. So just a little activity here, and I can pass out the focus group questions, but they'll be here on the slide as well, and we're not really going to do it the way this is located on here just because it's casual. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just because it's casual, and I know you guys want to get out of here fairly soon. We're at the end of the conference, and I understand that. So if you just want to split into groups based on your table and kind of go around and discuss what some of these questions are that are here, and then if you can please fill out the worksheet that's being passed out as well with the various questions, so we can get that information put into what we've been collecting thus far. And I'll just go over the questions really quickly. The first is, what are the biggest barriers for students with disabilities transitioning into and out of law school? So, if it's something with the LSAT or the bar exam, any of those types of things, or other barriers that you've experienced, if you could just talk about that as detailed as possible. Next question is, what are the biggest barriers to success for students with disabilities enrolled in law school? So that can be within your classroom, it can be on a social level, really anything that you've experienced while you've been in law school. And then finally is, what ways can you affect change on your campus or in your community that will have a positive impact on the legal profession for people with disabilities. So if it's things that you've done already, things that you're starting to implement, or things that you would like to see implemented, we want to know all of that. So I'll give you about 15 minutes or so, kind of talk about it with your group, and then we'll get some input and get a little bit of a discussion going, I think. Thanks.
Museum was actually a seating room. So it's booked full, but they use the wall figure.
Hi.
I'm George. I did take it twice. I can see
I couldn't bear the thought of taking it again.
I was federal
They did.
You're good.
Considering the accommodation, so yeah, I'm better than everything.
What I feel is added everything.
I got I feel especially
And I had a similar issue right in development disabilities.
accommodations are all
Really tested.
what if
That will
this
make a voice
might
out.
be
Started from scratch and lost
other
And so they didn't know this even
any
existed.
thought
I didn't know it existed, so that's not Chris.
I
Really cool.
Now, actually, it applies to everybody. But essentially, I see business.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I like some
I've been a member, I don't know if I
accommodations, not
but when I talk about it, I say, oh, it's disability organization that compared to AAPD, and then they'll remember AAPD. You know what I mean? At first I would just describe what it is, and I said, no, I say it's the cross disability organization that is national. And however, I have another thing. So just that one thing. It has to be used. I like to everybody
Well, I can say that when I have my
Reasonable and also
for my one else of her internship, I worked at Disability Advocacy Incorporated. From Albany. It's the PNA up there. And So they were very accommodating. On the third floor, we had all the last summer I worked for state here. And they were very accommodating as well.
But again, it has to be one, not
No.
separate.
I was very open.
I'm happy to be a film student. Beginning, I was not.
Just in general, having mobility, this is just accommodating, but it's so much more. Working the sweat all this time.
I mean, part of what's like,
So somewhere I'm in relaxed members with. That's my Facebook. My Facebook, I do is JT Schwartz. And at that, you I have another one. So I don't look at, I get the emails. And sometimes I don't always have time.
I'm good friends.
I am not
And right now I'm interning at a firm. And they're paying me.
Right, it's on the second
So it's my first
real bad carpal tunnel pain.
I'm not affiliated with CX. No, I didn't. I actually I joined Mexico. I think I moved the wrong place and it came up. And what was
So actually,
So much more.
maybe before, about my name, see, part of it is that this organization, you, AAPD, so the fact that I have, in other words, I saw a new head of government I really liked, who's not a lawyer, knows something about money business. I really liked him. And he said, you're going to have a battle. We started talking about how many but when I got there, I researched New York State months you have to complete in the ABA. And the ABA rules, but every state can do different. I could never finish law school because I didn't have enough time to do 2 years part-time for 84 months. When from their own panel, it said I had up to 105 as a part-time student. And then I said yes, but in the New York State bar examiners, it said I have up to 135. Okay, so if I have 7 months left, that's 30, that's 60 months. So, but what do you go on?
Theoretically,
And so you can handle it in a regulatory manner
accommodations are never an
and
issue.
say, these states say this and you say this.
Like,
And you could say,
there can
and we
always
can
be
do it,
dispute
or
over
we
the necessity of various things.
say there has to be some
It's easy. I say yes, they say no, I say no, they say no. Who wins? You can't.
because in particular, there's certain categories of need
There
for
are
people
things
to
that I
decide.
always but I think I probably should have if I had a group.
But there are other reasons, like men or women have a child, or they would do suspension. Yeah, maybe schools have discretion.
Yes, I have. Here is the big one. What they do, what they do, the way they do it.
Reservation. Everyone I called up said a different price. No, she had a reward system. Okay. Yeah. They said you need more, you need $5,000 more, or $10,000 more, and there's no seat left in
When
that
it comes to
category.
things
So
where,
that was supervised.
where it's not an issue of physical safety or day-to-day life, it's academic, you know.
And Glenn Tilton is ex-chairman of the
I did find out. I think.
Hey guys, we'll take about 5 more minutes and then we'll reconvene.
So there's something, if you ever need a phone number, there's something called gethuman.com. Have you ever heard of that?
Yep.
If you want, you're calling a corporation, you go to gethuman.com, then you put in a corporation, and they give you a set of phone numbers and information about how to get through. So in that area, when you put in your phone numbers, you call them back. And I had 3 phone numbers in, and I got called back. And I put my brother's phone number in. That's one of my other information. So they called me back, and this supervisor complained that I raised my voice.
But we have.
My brother, to me, in fact, I was getting my mother and
It depends on the issue.
I was doing the deal. I was advocating for my mom to get this in. So it's whatever I had to do, I had to do it. My high school class was Glenn Tilton's boss.
For me, it's
And then
an
they came
issue
to
of
the
I
show, and
can't,
my class,
you know, there is no
he became head of Chevron and a big.
For instance, I suggested I received note-taking service, and the way I had always studied throughout my entire academic career, I get notes immediately after class. I had to do the same thing. Make my personal notations to them, and learn material incrementally. At GW, they have a note-taking database where you have to make sure that you don't know that's a shaker and you for reasons I still don't understand they weekly index the notes. Sometimes weekly. Sometimes it takes longer than that, and it's pushed to this anonymous database, which I then download and print them. And by then, 2 to 3 class periods have gone by. I think it's absurd, and they've gone to this great level of creative systems that does nothing but makes things harder for me for no reason. And I said, can you have a note taker simply email them to me after class? Supply a dummy email if you that routes me. You really want to make sure that we don't know each other. And figure out that we'll figure out who each other are. I can list off the names of my note takers. We were never formally introduced, but we figure it out pretty easily. the idea that there's some legitimate anonymity here is a farce. To be honest, if I could turn they offered that based on the professor's compliance, but I don't see how a transcript of questions about lectures does me that much good. Because it takes away the inherent advantage.
All right, so if everyone's kind of wrapping up conversation, and what we'll do is we'll start with one of the groups, but everyone feel free, and if the group can just discuss kind of what they talked about in their own group, and then everyone feel free to add to that conversation rather than going one group at a time, I think. So if we want to start maybe with this group right here in the front, and just give me a little bit about what you talked about for each of the questions.
So for question number 1 about the biggest barriers, we talked about the accommodations for the LSAT and for the bar exam. We talked about...
Well, and what have been your experiences with that? Did you seek accommodations? Did you not seek accommodations? If so, why not? Did you receive everything that you requested?
So I'm totally blind, and I applied for accommodations, like double timed, and I also asked to use the screen reader for at least the reading comprehension. And I was denied, and I had to hire, even when I appealed, I was denied. And then I had to get an attorney, which helped me write a letter to them and work with them to not only grant the accommodation for the screen reader, but also work with them on how to test it before access to them. So that was a struggle for me, and also learning how to do logic games tactily, because not visually creating a diagram.
Right, right.
And then for the bar exam, I'm in the process of applying for accommodations, but it's just a lot they ask for, a lot of documentation. It's too much.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds good, so everyone can hear. Great. So just to sum up, for those of you who didn't hear, do you want to just sum up what you just said into the mic for really quickly? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Nope.
Looks like it's battery. I guess the other one? The other one's dead too.
Red light means no. It should be green.
Okay, well, I can just summarize what you said then. I guess if we don't have any other mic options. All right, that's okay. So you were just talking about seeking accommodations for double time in a screen reader, and then you did not receive those, so you had to seek legal help. Just by a show of hands, who here had a similar experience with that? And who here did not receive accommodations on their LSAT, or as many accommodations as they requested? Okay, and then is there anyone who did not ask for accommodations? And if I can get someone to talk about why they did not ask for accommodations.
Oh, well, I asked for some accommodations,
how do you think that legislation needs to change in order to get rid of that policy in general, so it wouldn't show that you had accommodations or extended time, or how do you think this needs to be dealt with at?
I don't think that policy that LSAT and the other people are flagging, I don't think it's compliant with, no other testing agency does it. I don't think it's compliant. I think there's a legal argument against it already with the existing laws.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just been hard to make because, unless they go to law school a lot of times, or there's issues around getting it through the court. But I think it's a policy that that's illegal.
Yeah, one of the panelists yesterday discussed, I think it's the ADA resolution, or they're working to get the
Right.
Yeah, there's a, they just had a meeting in New Orleans. And my boss in New Orleans, was actually at that meeting. Just trying to get that policy removed, that they didn't feel at all. That it was the student receiving accommodations, which being on the admissions committee in the school, I see that when I get people's LSAC reports, it has a little asterisk that says this person received accommodations. Doesn't give me any information unless I think the school asks for it, but it's something that does stick out. I know what I'm looking at, but I don't know if everybody that sees that goes, what's that mean? It could mean millions of things.
Right.
And I think that's the issue, is it giving them an offense, or, someone may have a voice of this large print, and really that was actually a flag, right there, something like that. So someone like myself who had major, kind of other crises, major accommodation, the flag is the same.
Same across the board. So what is the policy that ABA is trying to work on right now?
They're trying to get rid of the flagging.
Yeah, they're just removing it.
Just straight across the board. And is it moving through anywhere,
I believe so. There's a pretty good push for it. I think because schools are pushing back on finding it. Schools aren't getting as pushed by it. I guess they're pushing back now.
Okay. Does anyone else have an accommodation LSAT story that they want to share?
I'll say I didn't request any accommodations via the LSAT. And part of it is just my personal history. I didn't become disabled until after undergrad. There's a significant gap between undergrad and law school. So I never dealt with accommodations. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what I needed.
Right.
I never had to be a student with a disability. And in hindsight, I'd be curious to see, had I gotten the accommodations on the LSAT that I get in my law school, how different my scoring would have been. I mean, 20/20 hindsight, but it's interesting that I wonder how many people go into that just not knowing where to start.
Yeah.
This has to do with, after getting into law school, I acquired, I'm mentioning this because I acquired carpal tunnel for my second horrible situation at that time I was in law school and having an inappropriate lawyer. It was new for me because I never needed it. I didn't know. I didn't know what they should do. Age discrimination too, I think, was involved. Just human rights, basic dignity, and I was paying a lot of money. And I was left with not in school. I hope I'll go back. I'm pretty sure I can go back partially because I know there's a support system with this group, the AAPD, and other things have changed. There's new personnel at my school. And I have to go back and take some courses over so I complete a year. I can't transfer unless I have I'm missing just a couple of points for a full year. Hopefully, most schools are not as bad as this one. And that if anyone who gets an acquired need, that we or you can help them understand what they're in for. I mean, there's all this lack of education, acceptance, and tremendous hostility and abuse. And they're also actually, there's something going on in their lawsuits in general, not just for disability, but there's some stuff going on about the fact that law school faculty are bullying and are inhumanely bullying students, and that it's not acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
And some of it's very sexist, let alone other kinds of discrimination. So
That's definitely a lot of issues kind of compiled into one there.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot going on now. There's more hope, and there'll be more change.
Great, yeah, absolutely. I think you had something to say in the back. Just go ahead and kind of circulate here so we can. Yep.
Hi, my name is Josh Little. I'm a 1L here at GW Law School, and with the focus on the LSAT, I went through a 2-year ordeal to get accommodations on the test. I eventually did receive extended time, although about half what I had received throughout my entire academic career, and half that was requested by the medical professionals who evaluated me. But what I found is really a systemic hostility in the organization towards accommodations of any kind. Policies put in place simply to make the process more cumbersome for the student requesting accommodations. And I think that really is the root of any attempts at beginning change here. For anyone with a cognitive disability, as I do have, they had a policy where if you had a psychoeducational evaluation that took place before the age of 21, it was good for only 3 years. If it was done at any time after the age of 21, it was good for 5 years. When I was evaluated for the first time, I was aged 20 years and 9 months. By the time I was registering for the LSAT, that evaluation was no longer good, despite the fact that none of my conditions are in any way progressive and nothing would have changed. So I was required at that time, as somebody who was unemployed and uninsured, to redo the entire battery of tests to receive literally the exact same report, just to begin the process of seeking accommodations, which the LSAC then did not provide for another 4 appeals by my count, spanning 2 academic years. So I think that really, when we look at where do we make changes in the LSAC, it should begin really not with wider policy concerns, but really the simple things that can be controlled within the organization itself.
Thank you. Are there resources out there that kind of help people to walk through the process with the LSAT, with any of the applications through LSAC and any of those sorts of things? How did you, when you were beginning this process, how did you find the resources that were available? Yeah.
Actually, the response to that raises another answer to your first question on the sheet, which is our students' relationships with pre-law advisors and the lack of knowledge of pre-law advisors regarding how to go about getting LSAT accommodations. That's just one. I mean, normally you wouldn't think that you would go to a pre-law advisor to get information about the LSAT, but I think when it comes to accommodations, you can find what you need. I'm actually done. Sorry.
No, that's good. So, lack of knowledge by pre-law advisors, maybe, do you think if they had some sort of educational information that was presented to them, would that be a valuable asset?
Yeah, which is something that we've been talking about in NALSWD, kind of making appearances at meetings of pre-law advisors, because they do have their own organization. So we're working on letting them know that we're here and that they should probably consider us when they provide their services to students on campuses.
Great, absolutely. Everyone's getting a workout here today.
I just wanted to add that at NALSWD we tried to create a guide for the LSAT, and one of the reasons why I really was wanting to make this guide, I joined NALSWD initially to help create the guide, and I really was passionate about doing that because, like Kate said, there was nothing for an incoming law student, and that's a real issue.
For law students.
Yes, it was actually made for people to get accommodations on the LSAT, and the issue is that there's not really any resources through NALSWD as of right now until you are a law student. So it was very awkward to reach out to a law student and say, like, hi, I'm not sure what to do, I'm pre-law, and they just give you a guide. I think that there should be more in place with pre-law to facilitate better accommodations on the LSAT, because it's really intimidating to kind of approach it without having any background or basis.
Okay, great. So definitely resources to pre-law students specifically, both at their level and then with pre-law advisors for students who aren't aware. And I guess we can kind of transition. Thank you so much. I guess we can try to transition a little bit away from the LSAT. I know we could probably talk for hours about that issue alone. Talk to me, guys, a little bit about issues faced while you were actually in law school. And this can be at an academic level with your classes, with issues with professors, or, issues with, for example, an inaccessible law review or things like that. And yes, I am coming to you here. And there you go.
So what I'm noticing is at law schools, at least in mine, and I know of others, the first of all, there's not very many disability rights law classes offered. So I think that needs to change. Law schools need to hire more faculty who are experts in disability law to teach more classes and make it part of the curriculum, and also just hire more disabled professors in general. And then also the lack of dialogue about disabilities and disability rights movement is really lacking in law school. Like it's not included in the civil rights courses. It's not included in the public interest courses. So that needs to really change, because I often find it overlaps with like critical race studies and civil rights issues. So and also maybe having a disability law journal and other extracurricular stuff like that, and educating law review and other journals that they have to make accommodations as well. Not just the law school, but the journals too, because they're a big part of your legal education.
Great. Thank you.
Not sure if I really need the mic, but worth considering too. One of the things we came up with in terms of barriers is that there is, unfortunately, the social stigma of receiving accommodations for testing while in law school. There's the perceived notion that you're getting extra help in this, very strict graded, heavily competitive field or course structure, and so students don't necessarily want to out themselves. And if they are going to request and receive accommodations, they want to be assured that it's not going to negatively affect their ability to interact with their fellow students or work in like moot court situations or on review, etc. So something there was making sure students feel comfortable even taking the time and putting the energy into requesting accommodations if at some point they're gonna just walk away from it or run away, depending on what other students are reacting with.
So is this an issue with professors kind of putting putting a lot of pressure on students, and that's why it's such an issue to not receive accommodations, or is it more just?
I think it's a more systemic issue with the law school environment and the way they do strict grading curves. It's very competitive. You're ranked. It's an artificial competitive system that's been created more for the employers to know, to make it easier for law firms to say, these are the people I want because they have this GPA. And unfortunately, it's an accepted part of what law school is, and it's terrifying to the students that need accommodated testing, because it puts this. It's like we're talking about the LSAC. I mean, you're putting an asterisk on yourself, not just your record, but yourself, because the other students can find out or will, or if you're not in the same testing room as they are, they're going to wonder why aren't they taking the test with us, and things like that. And there's that perceived notion that you're getting extra help and throwing their curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Sure.
I was just going to say that I also think that there, along with that stigma, I think you would call it, I'm not sure I need to see there. I also think it's important to note that the law school academic environment is more different than any other type of academic environment that we've ever been in prior to that. I do find that a few of my friends, including myself, I'm not ashamed or anything, found that going through the law school system actually showed us that we actually do need an accommodation. I never ever asked for an accommodation prior to law school because I didn't think I needed it, and I could get by okay without it. And I always thought that, I didn't finish the exam. Why didn't I finish the exam? Because I'm a slow reader. Well, why am I a slow reader? I never knew. So I just kept on going, and I got great grades or whatever, and just did what I had to do. But I never asked for any help. But when you get to the law school environment, having it be so strict and having it being taught in such a uniform way across the entire country, you're expected to work up to a certain level. And I think that it's hard for some students to self-advocate when they find themselves in that position where they're not meeting the goals that they should be, or that they're expected to meet without accommodations. I know I'm a 3L, and I spoke with a 1L last week before spring break, who was very, very insecure about not doing very well in law school, and she's never had any type of assessment done or anything, and she's seriously considering going somewhere and getting assessed and see if she does need some sort of accommodation, because she's finding that she can't process legal material and put her essays down on paper as well as she should. And I sat down with her for about an hour during lunch one day, and I tried to convince her, and I think I did, to see what can help. And I said that the more documentation you get now, the easier it's going to be for the bar to request accommodations then. But she was in the same boat that I was in. So I just think making students themselves realize that if they need help, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, so we at AAPD, we don't look at accommodations as help. We look at it as how can we help people achieve the most with their ability, and that's what they are. But I get the distinct impression that's not how most people in law school look at it. So how do you think we can go to try to create that change, to try to mainstream it and show that it's not an added advantage in any way? I mean, does anyone have any suggestion? Yeah.
Not really a suggestion. Well, I was just gonna. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Then, on one hand, people in the class, might know you're having accommodated testing because you're not around for the tests, but at the same time, you really, or at least here, you're forbidden to disclose to professors that you receive.
Thanks for showing up.
You're not allowed to disclose to the professor that you receive accommodations, and I guess it does kind of feel like, you really should, not as something to be ashamed of necessarily, but
You mean on exams? Or any aspect?
Any aspect.
Note-taking assistance or, except, I mean,
And exams are probably where it's most notable if you're not in the room with everyone else.
But like, I guess kind of feeling is that like the ideal is that no one should know that you have a disability. I feel like maybe that's kind of the way it comes. But so I guess as a solution, it would be better if you were able to disclose, or if there was like, well, if, like there was NALSWD on each campus, that kind of thing where you could talk with other people about that.
I didn't know that you couldn't disclose because we have special seniors. Someone with a special area, they know. If they know for one, why can't they know for others? Exams or something else, that's all.
Well, the schools treasure the illusion of anonymity. They don't want to
Do you have something else to say on this topic specifically?
Yeah, I'm talking about various things. The name of what's needed on all kinds of levels is inclusion. The culture of law school is exclusive in many areas. For example, even before I acquired my carpal tunnel, etc., I wanted to be in a study group. Now, not everyone wants one. Law school has a hierarchy. There are a lot of cliques, and in my school had a lot of cliques. And I didn't get a study group because I'm older, and I wanted to be around the young people. I wanted to be included, but they were studying with their friends. So just like you want a mainstream, there are all kinds of levels. In pre-law at NYU, the woman said to me, it was clear she was only interested in numbers because the pre-laws advisors work with the school and they recommend people to the law schools, and they're interested in the numbers to keep their ratings up. So the pre-law advisors vary as to whether they're really in your camp or in their own career and their own context.
Yeah, definitely. I think you hit on something really important with they're not, you mentioned if NALSWD had groups on individual campuses. And do you guys maybe work with any of the other civil rights groups on campuses or minority groups on campuses, and how do they feel about your issues? And I'm actually going to switch the microphone holding over to Michael here so that I can take notes. And if Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're a little microphone short, so that's the clip-on. We've lost the battery.
So, yeah, we have a disability-specific group at Stanford, but we are very small. So what we've done is on Minority Preview Day, a few years ago, we worked with the administration to include disability in Minority Preview Day for Admit Weekend, and ever since then, whenever there's big minority events, the disability group is always at the table. And the other minority groups on campus are always extremely supportive and are more than welcome to have us. And a lot of our members are in multiple groups as well, so it works out.
I go to a fairly smaller school, and in general, folks with disability or disability-focused groups at law schools typically don't exist, or they, like at Stanford, are very small. So at Lewis and Clark, I work with MALSA, the Minority Law Student Association, which is an all-inclusive minority group, as well as the Oregon State Minority Law Association. So that includes attorneys as well as law students from the different disparate groups. And I may be a singular voice in terms of disability issues, but that issue is still brought to the table. And it's something that does get brought up, or I force it periodically. But I think that's very doable, and especially at smaller schools that may not have different student groups specific to ethnic minorities or religious minority or disability even. So.
I think another good way would be to have schools host like disability law symposiums, just to bring in scholars and students who are interested in these issues, and just have dialogues and have people present their papers on disability issues, and just that would increase a lot of the education of faculty and students at the law schools.
Any other issues while being in law school that you guys see other than kind of the accommodations issues? Yes.
I guess this is still on the accommodation issue, essentially. I'm at a school where I basically am not accommodated at all, even though they told me, and based upon my admission, that they'd be willing to accommodate me. When I got there, it was a completely different, story. So I've basically kind of been fighting with the administration and the Disabilities Resource Center at my current law school to try to gain accommodations. And one of the things that, I kind of felt like was that maybe they were trying to, the deans in a way were trying to either, hope that, my 1L course load would just, take over my life and I'd just kind of, disappear, in that sense. Or, that be that, I would be intimidated as a, brand new first-year law student at a brand new school that, I wasn't going to be as persistent as maybe they would have thought, that, I wouldn't, repeatedly address the issue, hey, I'm hearing impaired, I need microphones in the classroom, having a hard time trying to follow the lectures, different things like that. So, at least on my end, I've tried to reach out to advocacy groups to help me in my situation because I'm in a place where I really don't have an advocate at my school. So it's something that, I've never experienced before because I went to GW as an undergrad and they did an exceptional job accommodating me. And even, all the way up throughout preschool, I've always been accommodated as a student with hearing impairment. So it's new to me where I'm having to actually, fight against the administration to receive accommodations.
Where are you at law school?
Excuse me?
Are you here at GW for law school?
No, I'm at a UDC David A. Clark School of Law. So, I'm dealing with the situation right now. If I have to transfer, so be it. But
And I guess when you're in law school, do you not work with the same disability services places? Or do you have to go through the dean of students?
well, at UDC, I guess the Disability Resource Center is in charge of the entire school, undergrad and graduate. So
I'm just wondering because there seemed to be kind of a wave of similarity here where everyone said that they were accommodated much better in undergrad than in law school. So I'm just trying to figure out if that's because you have to go through a different entity or just because you're switching schools or whatever.
It's really dependent on the law school in question. Mm-hmm. I go to a much smaller school, so our disability coordinator does everything for the undergrad, the education program, and the law school. If you go to a larger university or in cases where the law schools are their own entities, the law school will have their own rules, their own policies that differ from the undergrad campus because they may technically be their own entity. So your undergrad, which may have been awesome, you could go to the law school at that same campus and receive terrible accommodations. And I've kind of heard that through the emails that I receive periodically throughout the year from students asking for resources.
I have a point of information. It's not personal. It comes from looking at information that came to me, listservs, and a conference. The ADA served an education, was it IDEA served preschool K to 12. Those students go into undergrad and then graduate school. So part of the problem is the universities and the grad schools, the colleges, did not have to deal with all the people who come up through the system. They're just beginning to. So it's institutional.
What we see a lot in higher ed is folks who are covered under with their 504 plans and their IEPs up through high school and then have to go into what is covered by ADA. But I'm wondering if, but that is something that I feel like a lot of people deal with right as soon as they get into college. So I guess I'm wondering where the further discrepancy is going into law school.
I'm saying it's an accumulation from this history, and I realized this when I first acquired my disability, and I've been an educator, so I was looking at it institutionally. And at a school that was, university was a pioneer in ADA and had someone in the faculty who helped write the disability law. So that's a level, and I think you can wake up the schools that they are, and there's such inconsistency. There need to be guidebooks, guidelines, training, there are all kinds of things that this is coming down the pipe, whether it's law school or medical school or whatever, and the society has changed relative to someone like yourself, David, who's been through it from the beginning and benefited by an institutional biases. They're like racism, endemic. And racism, we still have it.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, we got one.
Yeah, one more, and then we'll talk about, I think, the transition out of law school.
Thank you. And then another thing that I noticed just from, the different schools that I've been to is a lot of schools don't have automatic doors anywhere. So if you are, then you might be able to get into a building, but then to get into the classrooms, you have to open the doors, or to use the restrooms, you have to open the doors. And, I just think it's not impossible, because most people, especially with physical disabilities, have learned how to open their own doors, because there's so many doors that aren't accessible that you figure out how to use your equipment for that. But it's just one of those things that gets really frustrating, and I think even if not every door was accessible, but at least the bathrooms on one floor were accessible, that would be a step in the right direction. And classrooms, where it can be a huge lecture hall, but you might only have 3 seats that you don't have to go down steps for or up steps for. That's another big issue for people. And, sometimes other students aren't aware that maybe they should get up and move so that you can have that seat. And then you kind of stand there like, I don't really want to have to ask you to move, but it looks like I'm going to have to do that. So just another thing to kind of keep in mind, too.
So I guess let's talk a little bit about the transition out of law school. There's obviously some serious issues with the bar exam, both similarly to what we talked about with the LSAT, as well as things like character and fitness and things like those issues. And then also just about entering the world of work and what you may have experienced so far and what your fears may be that people that have experienced, if you guys want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'm just nervous because yesterday they were saying that you should try and file your bar application as soon as possible. If you're disabled and you have to have, a extended time or something, which I will need. And I'm nervous because I don't know where I want to take the bar yet. So, and that's because I don't have a job yet. And that's the issue, is that I'm from Pennsylvania, but I don't want to take the bar in Pennsylvania because I want to work in Chicago or D.C. So that's my concern. And I think that that's something that the ABA doesn't really take into consideration at all, that we have to have a job before we can make all this extra effort to get our documentation in. So.
I don't want to hog too much mic time, but this might be more of a general issue. But it seems to me that it's fairly straightforward, at least easier, to get a lot of unpaid internships, and you get this awesome experience. But I would like to see that these unpaid internships and this experiences are turning into paid positions as you leave school. Once you graduate, you're taking the bar, you're not going to want to do another 3-month internship unpaid somewhere. You're just not going to be able to do it, whereas you may have had that flexibility while still in school. And so providing the resources, like as Kevin was going towards, trying to get things done earlier, there's more onus on you than even the other students. Every student in their third years want to make sure and scramble they have a job when they're getting out. But the students with disabilities have a lot of extra things to consider, and such as the time it takes to get accommodations. And so you want to make sure there's early enough opportunities to get to these positions so that you can plan far enough ahead for, be it accommodations for the bar or just the extra time it takes to plan travel, etc.
So is the biggest solution to that, do you think, is just being informed about how early you
have to work, or is
The
it?
information resource management. I'd like to just say, hey, awesome, let's have more jobs, but that's not a simple solution we can just make up. So.
Also, I think that instead of having the bars, the way the bar is right now, it's different in every state. The way that the bar is right now is every state is different. So if you have a disability, there needs to be some type of conglomerate like form that is applicable no matter what state you take it in. So that way you can, let's say, okay, I have to file in August. I'm not taking the bar until next May, but at least I can take it wherever I want. So that there should be some type of separate ad hoc like committee within the whatever the main bar, ABA, I don't know. I don't know the terms, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
So I'm always an advocate for mentorship because I think mentors are really important no matter what. And I think there needs to be more mentors reaching out to law students with disabilities who are graduating, especially if you've worked with those mentors in an internship or something, in terms of helping you transition between school and work. For me personally, I've never had a job in my life. I've just had internships. And so I've never had to deal with applying for a job, like paid jobs, and figuring out how to do that, like on USA Jobs or Schedule A. I've never had to do Schedule A before. So like I would like to see more guidance with what resources are available for you in terms of applying for jobs and help with accessing those resources, and also just mentors for, soft skills, like how to, maybe like professional development, kind of workshops or coaching or whatever for students with disabilities.
I have an idea of something that AAPD and NALSWD and maybe some of the minority bar groups could do, which is to create either one person or several people to have an ombuds person, an ombuds committee that can act as a liaison resource, and to have this a formal part of these organizations, and probably we can get funding. So it's like a mediation thing, but it means that no one is going to be alone. I tried using ombudsman at the university of my school, my law school. No help. No help. I tried to get a mentor. The people who were supposed to do it didn't follow through.
I think it's worthwhile you briefly touched on it, worthwhile to talk about the character and fitness issues as they pertain to mental health. And the difficulty there is bar associations in each state, my understanding is, they're not going to make a decision until you apply after law school or in your third year of law school, when it could be very, very important to find out prior to even entering your law school that you're even going to be able to sit for the bar. And instead of spending all the money on law school, we're going to find out you don't get to be a lawyer. You don't even get the chance. And every state has their own rules as to mental health and medication requirements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so providing resources and perhaps providing at the state bar level pre-committees to consider those aspects prior to your entrance to law school to make sure that you're not entering into a fruitless endeavor.
Michael, do you want to close us out?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just letting people look at this. Great. Well, first off, I'm sorry that I showed up late. It's quite embarrassing, but I was actually 15 minutes early, according to my clock, but 45 minutes late, according to everyone else's clock. So I know. So my only excuse is that I didn't have Dana telling me when I was supposed to be there. Anyway, so this sounded really great. I'm looking forward to reading the notes. So all of these that you guys got in front of you, we definitely want to pick up.
And if you would like to stay further connected with the Higher Education Project and our initiatives, if you want to put your email down on those papers as well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. but before you do that, I mean, just to encapsulate, the idea behind the higher education project is that, 21 years ago, 22 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. So most of us in this room are a part of this ADA generation. We've grown up with expecting certain things that we want to continue to see happen. And then we get into higher education, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we didn't mind giving you a high school education, but we're not necessarily interested in seeing you go on to get a degree or go on to get a job. So really the next fight for us is not curb cuts. The next fight for us, and we respect those folks who came before us, because without them, we would not have had the 22 years that we've had, because there have been incredible things that have happened in a very short amount of time as far as civil rights is concerned for people with disabilities. But our next fight is really going to be this fight for employment. It's going to be this fight in higher education. And that's what this project is all about. It's about saying that thank you for my high school education. Thank you for the fact that I can get into the grocery store. Now I actually want to run the company, right? And we've got the talent to do it, but yet we're still working at much less of a rate than everyone else. So in this recession, we've actually found that for every one person who lost a job, 2 people with disabilities lost a job, right? So we've got to not only get hired, but we've got to get hired at a higher rate. So those are some intimidating factors, but I also believe that it's not because we can't do it, it's because there are societal barriers that are preventing us from doing it, such as all the stuff that you guys were talking about today. So what's going to happen next is we want to impact the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. And we've got a lot of folks out there who we believe are talking about great things. So AHEAD, and I'm not sure how much I'm repeating, so I'm a little bit nervous, but so like AHEAD, for example, the Association of Higher Education Professionals, something like that. Anyways, they do great stuff, and we admire what they do, but they're not necessarily people with disabilities themselves talking about what we need. And that's what we love about NALSWD and the stuff that you guys do, because it actually is us speaking for ourselves. Same thing with AAPD, and we want to elevate that voice so that when that reauthorization comes through, it's not just about the professionals talking about us or about diversity folks completely ignoring the fact that we should be included inside of diversity, but we ourselves have the opportunity to stand in front of legislators and say, this is what we want to see, this is what we're fighting for, and we will get it. And so we've got some time to prep for that, to make sure that we've got the information that we need, to really organize the community. But this is a much bigger picture. So the fight that you're going to fight means that 10, 15 years from now, the law schools are going to be just as accessible as our high schools, hopefully more so, because we will have fought that fight. So it's not, I hate to say it, but the fact is you're going to fight for the next 2 years or the next year or whatever it is. But once you graduate, you've got a choice. And you're all going to get jobs because you're all incredibly smart and talented. But the question will be after that, what are you going to do for that next generation? Are you going to say, well, thank God I got through, fuck that, right? Or are we going to say, like the former generation before us, are we going to rally around this? Are we going to be willing to fight for that next generation and say, I couldn't easily take the bar exam. I made it through because I fought for it. So you made it through, but now are you going to just let that go? Or are we going to stand up and say, like, I think that's a great idea, Kevin. What about the idea that you can apply for the bar exam and it doesn't matter where you are, especially if you've got to apply, 2 years in advance, so that you can get the accommodations that you need. Maybe not that much, but I mean that's a long fucking time. Excuse my language. It's a Saturday. Can I curse on a Saturday? Is that all right? I'm sorry. I won't curse anymore. But I mean the point. And stop writing that on that screen. That is completely inappropriate. But the point is that we have the opportunity to organize around this, to make a huge difference, not for just ourselves, but for that next generation that's coming behind us. So I implore you to stand with us, to fight with us. I know that the NALSWD board has already said, we're going to help you make this happen. And I believe that if we work together, we can really impact this, because this is our fight. This is the fight of our generation for the disability community. The community before us did some incredible stuff. How many of you guys have ever seen the Section 504 sit-ins? Yeah. So people with disabilities have the longest sit-in in American history inside of a federal building. That's something to be proud of, right? We got Section 504 passed because we got pissed off and said we're going to make it happen. But that's not our fight anymore. Our fight has changed. And so I think, and people are always, the older generation of people with disabilities are always talking about how we don't care, right? Well, you don't care about this, you don't care about that. Well, that's because you fought that fight, and we appreciate that. And now we can kind of get on with our lives. But now we can't get on with our lives because we've hit that glass ceiling. So I'm asking you guys to join us in this fight. One of the things that we're going to do this summer is we're going to have a conference, or more like a forum, where we're going to bring some very high-level, excellent leaders within the disability community. So some of you guys, Beth has already promised to be there, right, Beth? She's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But I want to bring together college students, law students, PhD students, recent grads, all coming together to say, okay, here's what we think needs to happen in higher education. Here's what we're going to do it. And a lot of the stuff we're already going to know about. It's not about the fact that we don't know that these things need to change, but it's about the fact that we need a white paper that was done by people with disabilities so that we can take it before Congress and say, here's what you need to change, here's the forum that we made happen, and then organize around that. So I may be coming to some of you guys and saying, I need you to come to Washington, D.C. on June whatever. We haven't decided the date yet. But, you know, so that's the next step. So anyways, I'm rambling now, but the point is I want to thank you guys for the great work that you do. I love working with NALSWD. We are the ADA generation. We've gotten 21 years of some really cool stuff. Now it's our time to fight for that generation that's coming behind us. And this is the new frontier, higher education and employment. So thank you guys so much, and I look forward to working with you all some more. And let's give Dana a big round of applause, because of me, she had to do this all by herself, so she's incredible. One more big round of applause for Dana.
I have one quick thing to say. I went to a conference at the New York City Bar, it must have been 10 years ago. It was about international public interest law. They had people from Argentina after disappearing, and they had someone from Russia say when they wanted to change that country, what did they do? They had people become lawyers and become public interest lawyers, which they had none of, to make a change. They sent people to law school.
Yeah. Right on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thanks so much, AAPD, for coming. I have nothing else to say. You've heard from me all weekend. Thanks again for coming. You'll be receiving emails from me in the next few weeks as follow-up. But if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, thanks so much for coming. It's been great.
Thank you.